You're 10 minutes into focused work when your phone lights up. A notification. Then another. You glance down just once, and when you look back up, the thread is gone. The quiet concentration you had feels unreachable, like it belonged to someone else 5 minutes ago. You don't like admitting how one interruption can completely knock you off track for the rest of the day. Here's the interruption you can use today, exactly as written: I restart instead of recovering. Say it once to yourself, close whatever pulled you away, and reset your posture, feet on the floor, screen centered, and hands still for a moment. In the next 10 minutes, the panic about lost time eases. You stop trying to claw your way back into focus and instead feel permission to begin again cleanly. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't rush you, but it will keep you from spiraling. The pain here is specific. It's not distraction itself, it's the aftermath. The moment after focus breaks, when your mind feels scattered and heavy, and restarting feels harder than starting ever did. You tell yourself you've already blown the session, so you half work, half scroll, dragging the disruption with you for hours. This is costing you real output and real calm, because one small break turns into a lost block of time. What makes this so frustrating is that you know how to focus. You've done it before. But once the thread snaps, you don't know how to re-enter without force. So you either push too hard or burn out, or you give up and promise yourself you'll do better later. By the end of this lesson, you won't eliminate interruptions. What you'll learn is how to restart your attention deliberately, using a short reset that works even when your focus feels completely gone. You'll know how to stop bleeding time after a break, how to re-enter work without resistance, and how to feel steady even when your day gets chopped up. The goal isn't perfect focus, it's faster recovery, so interruptions don't own the rest of your schedule. If learning how to regain control after disruption feels useful, these lessons are built to give you tools that work in real conditions, not ideal ones. Subscribe for more lessons like this. First, you'll learn how to reset your body quickly so your mind can follow. Next, you'll see how to avoid the common mistake that makes restarting feel impossible after an interruption. Then, you'll practice a simple ritual that rebuilds momentum without forcing motivation. Finally, you'll watch how these tools come together in a real situation where focus breaks repeatedly, but never fully collapses. There's a moment later where the interruption happens right as you're finally making progress, and the urge is to abandon the task completely because restarting feels too expensive. When that moment hits, you'll know how to step back in without dragging frustration with you. You're finally in it. The work is moving. Your breathing is even. The task isn't fighting you anymore. Then a notification pops up, or someone asks a quick question, or your browser steals your attention for 30 seconds. When you come back, the mental thread you were holding is gone. You stare at the screen, annoyed, trying to remember where you were, and the effort to restart feels heavier than the work itself. Here's the microscript to use the moment you notice that gap, exactly as written: I restart small, not where I left off. Say it once, then act on it immediately. This works because the biggest mistake after an interruption is trying to recover the exact mental state you had before. You replay the last sentence you wrote, reread notes, scroll back, hoping the old momentum will magically reappear. That recovery effort creates friction. Restarting small skips the friction entirely. You don't chase the lost thread, you lay down a new one. Picture this in a familiar North American work setting. You were drafting an email or coding a feature or outlining a report. You get pulled away for a minute. When you return, you might reread everything, feel overwhelmed, and stall. With this rule, you ignore the urge to reconstruct. You choose a tiny restart, write a single placeholder sentence, retype the last line, or open a new bullet and name the next obvious step. It's not elegant. It's effective. Here's the tiny action you can take today. After any interruption longer than a minute, deliberately begin with a smaller step than where you left off. If you were writing paragraphs, restart with a sentence. If you were analyzing data, restart by labeling one column. This is measurable. Either you downsized the restart or you tried to jump back in at full speed. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Take a breath and imagine coming back to your task and not trying to remember everything. Imagine choosing something almost too small to count and doing it anyway. Notice how that feels lighter. That lightness is the point. Why this works is grounded in how attention actually functions. Focus isn't a switch you flip back on. It's momentum you rebuild. When you try to restart at the same intensity you had before the interruption, your brain resists because it hasn't ramped up yet. A smaller restart gives it room to accelerate naturally. A common friction point here is pride. You think, I should be able to jump back in. That thought turns the restart into a test of discipline instead of a process. Restarting small isn't lowering standards. It's matching the task to your current state instead of punishing yourself for being interrupted. Here's a North American example outside of work. You're reading something important. You get pulled away by a call. When you return, the instinct is to find your place and continue as if nothing happened. With this approach, you reread the last paragraph slowly or summarize it in your own words before moving on. You don't rush. You rebuild orientation first. Try this brief, slow practice now. Close your eyes and imagine an interruption. Feel the irritation. Then imagine choosing one simple action you can do without effort. Notice how the irritation doesn't disappear, but it stops blocking you. Another mistake to watch for is waiting for motivation to return. Motivation is unreliable after disruption. Action is not. Restarting small bypasses motivation entirely. You move first, and motivation follows later, if it needs to. This matters later because interruptions rarely come one at a time. They stack. If every interruption forces a full mental recovery, your day fragments fast. But if each interruption is followed by a clean, small restart, you stop bleeding time. The cost of disruption drops dramatically. As you move forward, you'll notice a new challenge. Sometimes you restart small, but your attention still feels jumpy. You keep restarting over and over, never quite settling. That's not a failure of the restart. It's a sign you're missing the next piece. That's where the next idea comes in, and where restarting turns into re-anchoring instead of repeated entry. You're back at your desk after the interruption. You followed the rule. You restarted small. You typed a sentence, labeled a section, and opened the file you needed. Technically, you're working again, but something still feels off. Your attention keeps sliding. Every few seconds, your mind drifts, scanning for the next distraction. You're restarting, but you're not settling. This is where most people get frustrated and assume focus is gone for the day. The mistake here isn't that you restarted wrong. It's that you treated focus as purely mental, when it's also physical. After an interruption, your body is often still in alert mode. Even if your hands are moving, your nervous system hasn't landed yet. When that happens, your attention keeps jumping, looking for threats or novelty. You try to push through it mentally, and the resistance grows. The correction is to anchor the body before you ask the mind to stay. Here's the rule, exactly as written: I anchor my body before I anchor my task. Say it once, then do one physical action that signals stability. This works because attention follows sensation. When your body feels scattered, your mind mirrors it. Anchoring gives your system a clear signal that it's safe to stay put. You're not calming down emotionally, you're reestablishing orientation. Picture this in a familiar North American work environment. You're at your desk, notifications just interrupted you, and you've restarted with a small task. But your leg is bouncing. Your shoulders are tight. Your eyes keep flicking to the corner of the screen. With this correction, you pause for 10 seconds. Feet flat on the floor. Back against the chair. Hands resting on the desk. You're not meditating. You're placing yourself. Here's the script you use immediately after: right here is enough. You don't analyze it. You let it land. Here's the tiny action you can take today. After an interruption, before continuing your task, place both feet flat on the ground and press them down gently for 5 seconds. That's it. This is measurable. Either you anchored your body or you skipped it. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Take one breath and imagine yourself returning to work without rushing your body into position. Notice how your attention feels diffuse. Then imagine grounding your feet, settling your shoulders, and letting your eyes rest in one place. Notice the difference. It's subtle, but real. A common mistake here is thinking this is about relaxation. It's not. You don't need to feel calm to focus. You need to feel located. Anchoring tells your nervous system, I'm here. I'm not moving. This is where attention goes. Another version of this shows up when you're working from home. You get interrupted, stand up, sit back down, and shift positions, half work from the edge of your chair. Your body never commits, so your focus never does either. Anchoring corrects that by making the physical position non-negotiable for a moment. Why this works is simple. After disruption, your system is still scanning. Grounding reduces scanning. When scanning drops, focus can consolidate. You're not forcing concentration, you're removing the need to keep checking elsewhere. Here's a quick pattern interrupt. If you notice your attention drifting repeatedly, ask, is my body actually settled? Not, am I focused? If the answer is no, adjust your posture before adjusting your plan. This matters later because some days are interruption heavy. Messages, meetings, noises, people moving around you. If you rely only on mental effort to restart, you will burn out by mid-afternoon. But if each restart includes a physical anchor, your recovery time shrinks. Focus becomes something you return to, not something you chase. Notice the progression now. First, you stopped trying to recover the old thread and restarted small. Now, you're learning how to stay once you've restarted. You're building a stable entry point instead of a fragile one. As we move forward, the pressure increases again. There will be moments when interruptions keep coming, and anchoring alone isn't enough. You'll need a way to protect a short window of focus even when the environment won't cooperate. That's where the next idea comes in, and where getting back on track turns into staying on track, even under stress. There's a belief that quietly keeps your focus fragile after interruptions. If I can't protect a long block of time, it's not worth restarting. It sounds logical. You want depth, not fragments. But under real conditions, messages, meetings, noise, this belief turns every break into a full stop. Here's the myth to let go of. Focus doesn't require long stretches to survive. It requires protected entry. When you wait for perfect conditions, you give interruptions more power than they deserve. The instruction when interruptions keep coming is simple and narrow. You don't fight the environment. You create a small container that can live inside. Here's the script, exactly as written, I'm protecting the next 5 minutes. Say it once, then define what those 5 minutes are for. This matters because attention stabilizes faster than you think, but only if it knows how long it needs to hold. When time feels open-ended after disruption, your mind keeps scanning for the next interruption. A short, protected window tells your system it's allowed to settle now, not later. Picture this in a familiar North American work setting. You've restarted small and anchored your body, but messages keep arriving and people keep passing by. Old, you might abandon the task entirely, telling yourself you'll try again later when things calm down. With this correction, you choose a 5-minute task you can finish, write 1 paragraph, clean 1 dataset, outline 1 section, and you commit to protecting only that. Here's the key difference, you're not promising deep focus. You're promising completion. That promise is easier to keep under pressure. Here's the tiny action you can take today. The next time your focus breaks twice in 10 minutes, set a 5-minute timer and choose a task that can be finished in that window. Silence notifications if you can. If you can't, ignore them. This is measurable. Either you completed the 5-minute task or you didn't. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Imagine yourself saying, I'm protecting the next 5 minutes, and feel the relief in that limit. Notice how it reduces the pressure to get back on track in some grand way. 5 minutes is survivable. 5 minutes is doable. A common mistake here is choosing the wrong task. If the task can't be finished in 5 minutes, your brain knows it and resists. Pick something with a clear end. Completion is the signal your system needs to relax. Another mistake is extending the window too soon. You finish the 5 minutes, feel good, and immediately aim for 30. That often backfires. Let completion do its work first. If you continue, do it by choice, not momentum pressure. Why this works is grounded in how stress interacts with time. After repeated interruptions, your system is wary. Long commitments feel risky. Short containers feel safe. Once safety returns, focus deepens on its own. Here's a brief slow practice you can do right now. Picture a day full of interruptions. Instead of fighting them, imagine stacking 3 5-minute completions across the afternoon. Notice how different that feels from chasing one perfect block. That's not settling. That's adapting. This matters later because some days never calm down. If your focus depends on quiet, those days become lost days. But if your focus depends on short, protected entries, you can still produce meaningful output even under constant noise. Over time, those small completions add up to real progress and less frustration. There's a vignette coming where all of this collides: repeated interruptions, a tight deadline, and the temptation to give up because conditions aren't ideal. You'll see how restarting small, anchoring the body, and protecting 5 minutes work together, not to create perfect focus, but to keep momentum alive when the day refuses to cooperate. You're deep into the afternoon when it starts to feel impossible. Your calendar is cluttered, your phone won't stay quiet, and every time you sit down to work, something pulls you away again. You finally get a few minutes of traction, and then another interruption. A question. A notification. A noise. The irritation builds fast, and the thought creeps in, this day is shot. The old reaction almost wins. You consider abandoning the task entirely, telling yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow when conditions are better. You feel that familiar slump, the mix of fatigue and frustration that comes from trying to focus on a day that won't cooperate. You pause. You don't try to recover the perfect focus you had earlier. You restart small. You open the document and type a single sentence that names the next step. It's not impressive. It's enough to re-enter. But your attention still feels jumpy. Your shoulders are tense. Your eyes keep darting to the edge of the screen. So you anchor your body. Feet flat on the floor. Back against the chair. Hands resting on the desk. You take one breath and let yourself feel where you are. Still, the environment isn't calming down. This is where the old pattern would usually collapse. You decide it's not worth it without a long, quiet stretch. You drift into half work, half distraction, dragging the task behind you like a weight. Instead, you choose the next move deliberately. I'm protecting the next 5 minutes, you say quietly. You look at the task and ask a different question. What can I finish in 5 minutes? Not improving. Not perfect. Finish. You pick something small and concrete. A paragraph. A short calculation. A checklist. You set a timer and begin. For those 5 minutes, the interruptions don't stop, but they lose their authority. You notice them without responding. You keep your hands moving. When the timer goes off, you stop. And something shifts. The task isn't done, but it's less hostile. The resistance has softened. You feel a small sense of completion where there used to be none. Then it happens again. Another interruption. Another pull away. The frustration flares, but it doesn't take over. You repeat the sequence. Restart small. Anchor the body. Protect 5 minutes. The third time, it feels easier. Not effortless, just less charged. You finish another small piece. The deadline still exists. The noise hasn't gone away. But you're no longer stuck in the cycle of starting and abandoning. Midway through the hour, you notice something subtle. You're calmer. Not because the situation improved, but because you stopped fighting it. You stopped demanding ideal conditions and started working with what was actually available. The old reaction almost tries to return when you think about everything still left to do. The scope feels large again. But now you recognize that thought for what it is, a signal to restart the process, not a verdict on the day. You protect another 5 minutes. By the end of the afternoon, the task isn't finished. The day isn't neat. You didn't achieve the deep, uninterrupted focus you were hoping for. But you didn't spiral. You didn't lose hours to frustration. You didn't give up entirely. You've made real progress. As you shut down your computer, you notice how different this feels from the days that usually end in self-criticism. There's no story about wasted time. No resentment toward the interruptions. Just a quiet sense that you stayed in control longer than you used to. The situation is still ongoing. Tomorrow will bring its own disruptions. But now you know something important. Losing focus doesn't mean losing the day. You can restart without force. You can settle without silence. You can move forward even when conditions aren't ideal. That's the improvement, not a perfect ending, but a steadier one. Chapter break. Delete this line. What you've been practicing in this lesson is the difference between reacting to broken focus and responding to it with structure. Reacting looks like getting frustrated, trying to force your way back into the exact mental state you had before, and giving up when that doesn't work. Responding looks like restarting deliberately, settling your body, and creating small containers where focus can return on its own. One approach turns interruptions into losses. The other turns them into pauses you know how to move through. First, you learn to stop chasing the lost thread and restart smaller than where you left off. That removed the pressure to get back to something that no longer exists. Then, you learn to anchor your body before asking your mind to stay, so attention had a physical place to land instead of floating restlessly. Next, you practiced protecting short windows of time, 5 minutes at a time, so focus didn't depend on ideal conditions or long, uninterrupted blocks. Finally, you saw how these tools combine in a real, messy day where interruptions kept coming, but momentum never fully collapsed. The core lesson underneath all of this is simple. Focus isn't something you preserve perfectly, it's something you recover repeatedly. When you stop treating breaks as failures and start treating them as restart points, you regain control over your time and energy. You don't need discipline to be unbreakable. You need a reliable way back in. Now let's lock this into action with 3 specific things you can do today. First, the next time your focus breaks, say the line "I restart small, not where I left off," and immediately choose a smaller entry point than feels necessary. 1 sentence. 1 label. 1 simple action. Measure success by whether you re-entered at all, not by how smooth it felt. Second, add a physical anchor to every restart. Before continuing your task, place both feet flat on the floor, settle your back against the chair, and let your hands rest for 5 seconds. Don't skip this step. It's what keeps your attention from sliding again before it has a chance to stabilize. Third, protect 1 5-minute completion today. Set a timer, choose a task you can finish in that window, and commit to nothing beyond it. When the timer ends, stop. Completion is the signal your system needs to relax. Anything beyond that is optional. As you continue building this skill, the next layer to work on is maintaining focus once it returns, how to extend a recovered thread without tightening up or becoming brittle. A natural follow-up lesson would be something like focus, staying steady when your attention finally comes back, because it deals with what happens after the restart, when the temptation is to over-control or rush. That's where recovery turns into continuity. You don't need a perfect environment. You don't need to eliminate interruptions. What you're building is resilience, the ability to come back to what matters without carrying frustration with you. When you can do that, your days stop feeling fragile. Breaks stop feeling catastrophic. And focus becomes something you trust yourself to regain. If you want continued calm control over your attention, even when the day keeps interrupting you, subscribe and keep building this skill.